All right, welcome everyone to the Chicago Football Connection podcast. I'm your host, Steve Letizia. Follow me on Twitter at CFC Bears. Joined by my co-host, Luke O'Grady. Follow him on Twitter at Luke O'Grady. Going live a little early today to discuss the Bears 53-man roster. So it just became official just a few minutes ago. So we thought we'd hop on, just talk through it, kind of do maybe like a little season preview. But yeah, no really huge surprises. I feel like they kind of kept everyone that we thought they would. A couple guys I would say like Ja'Tyre Carter maybe was a little bit surprised. Reddy Stewart, had a lot of fans. Daniel Hardy making the team was maybe a little bit of surprising, but overall, these are just bottom of the roster guys. Not a whole lot, nothing too crazy. But what are your thoughts initially on the roster?
No, we kind of did this during the Chiefs game when we went live. We looked at some of these spots and said, these are the guys that'll be, the ones vying for those last spots. The unfortunate thing is that guys that are battling that much to get that last spot, a lot of the time, if anyone else becomes available or gets cut or enter the Bears line of sight, they're usually the first to go. So, if your favorite person, like if you were a big fan of Daniel Hardy in the preseason, which I was, and he's made the team now, like it's awesome and he deserved to do so, but don't be surprised if what you see today isn't, the contributing roster week one, or especially, like maybe like week 5 or 6, we'll say.
For sure. We already know they're going to make at least one move. Kari Blasingame was cut, but they've already Brad Biggs has already reported they're going to re-sign him tomorrow once they move Patrick Scales to IR. But then they'll also will have to sign a long snapper. So once they sign that long snapper, they're going to have to cut one of these guys. My guess is it could be Daniel Hardy if they cut 6 DNs instead of 5. They also could potentially cut, maybe an offensive lineman because they do have 10 offensive linemen. So one of those guys is kind of the people I'm eyeing who might get cut once they do sign that long snapper to replace Patrick Scales. So yeah, it's going to look a little bit different. We also don't know if they have any waiver claims in. If they might claim a D end or a D tackle and cut someone, or who knows? They might claim a couple of different positions, and then some of those guys at the bottom rosters are then going to be cut. So it's nothing final yet, but this is the initial 53-man roster.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about. Just 2 years ago, when Poles took over, the 53-man roster got locked, and then in like a week we had 7 new players, or like 8 new players that we had signed off of the waivers.
Right.
And I wonder if we would have looked back at the roster at the time, if we would have said, there are 7 people, we'll say, that aren't locks for the roster. I think it's kind of telling of where the roster is now versus where it is then. I would be surprised if the Bears make, 1 or 2 moves from waivers. The more competitive your roster looks, the more you start to look at cuts as like, well, dude, they didn't make that team. They're not exactly all diamonds in the rough. But when you're starting to build a roster and you're trying to build culture and get young talent in there, teams on the rebound are going to be using that waiver priority more and more. So I'd actually be surprised if the Bears did a whole lot of waiver maneuvering this year, but that's usually a good thing. It usually means that your roster is already in a spot where you don't need much supplementing.
You don't want to be claiming guys on waivers like right now. That means you have holes on your roster. This waiver wire claim right now, it's really the most overhyped time for roster building. It's not really meant to be a way to build to get long-term pieces. It's a way to plug gaps for 1 year, for this year, is really what it's used for. And that's what we saw all 7 of those guys that they claimed was that 2 years ago are no longer on the roster.
Yeah.
They were just guys to fill gaps. And I would be shocked. I would honestly be shocked if they claimed anyone. I think they got their 2 guys, Darrell Taylor, the DN, and Chris Williams, the tackle. Those were essentially their waiver claims. They just happened to trade a pick for them. So it would be surprising to me if they claimed someone, unless someone got cut that they just really weren't expecting, and they decided. But I would say if they claim more than one person, that would be pretty surprising, because of just how much farther the roster has come from a few years ago. There's no glaring holes like there once was.
Yeah, I know. I completely agree. It was really just about like what the numbers were going to be at each position, and you and I tried to do like a little bit of an exercise in that, and I'm looking at it now, and it doesn't look like the numbers were exactly what we had pegged them to be. I remember when we first finished, we thought it was going to be roughly like 26 on offense and 24 on defense, and it looks like the current split is 25-25. Do you know where they strayed from the path a little bit?
The difference is they cut Kari Blasingame, the fullback. We had the fullback on the roster, but they are going to bring him back. And then they kept instead of that, they kept a 6th D end, and we only had 5 D ends.
Ah, okay.
So that was the difference.
We pretty much tracked about right.
Right. Yeah, the number wise, we were pretty right. We missed on a couple of different guys, but I think the numbers were pretty right. And then Blasingame's coming back, and they might end up cutting another D end once they sign a long snapper. So it could end up being exactly what we kind of thought. So we'll see. I guess kind of just looking through, they did keep Dom Robinson. I know a lot of people on Twitter were kind of disappointed in that, and I kind of agree. I mean, he hasn't really shown much. I thought he flashed a little bit this preseason, but for the most part, was really outplayed by Hardy and Kareem and Jacob Martin and
definitely
Booker, obviously. So, but he ends up making the team. I do think with him, the thought process there is when they drafted him, they knew he was a project and knew he was going to take a while because he was basically changing positions. So when you draft a guy like that, you're going to give him 3 years and have to at least 3 years minimum, and that's what I think this would be his third year. So, so that's kind of I think the reason in there. The other one that I was surprised with, not surprised with because he was a draft pick last year, but Noah Sewell. I thought we talked about this last time. I thought Micah Baskerville really outplayed him.
Yep, totally.
But it seems like he maybe just got the draft pick bump there. But again, we're talking about the 5th linebacker, so not really anything. To get too upset over.
I don't know what Soul would have or could have done so far this offseason that would have cemented his spot above Baskerville. He's been a ghost, man. I haven't heard about him, haven't seen him, and Baskerville has flashed a ton. So that was a little weird. It feels like that is almost strictly the old draft position pedigree that keeps him in that spot. The Bears almost I wouldn't say got lucky, but they had Ian Wheeler and Simba Webster, Larry Borum and Douglas Coleman go to IR so far, and I think there'll probably be one more, like you said, with.
There's someone I missed. There was Dante Pettis also went to IR for the year. He's not coming back.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And there was someone else that I've got to include in there, but someone else went to IR too.
Those people going to IR made a couple of decisions that were looking like a little, interesting. Probably a lot easier. Like having Ian Wheeler and Simba Webster and Dante Pettis go to IR pretty much cemented Velus Jones having a spot on this roster.
Yep. I'm glad you brought him up. I want to talk about him next.
Yeah, I mean
that was one where I had him initially on the cut list, and you were saying that you thought he was going to make it, and he did. But I do think that has to do, at least in some part, with all those guys going on IR. But I think you're probably right. They do probably believe in Velus Jones Jr. maybe a little bit more than I do. And he does. I mean, he's the 5th wide receiver and 5th running back. So and he's the primary kick returner. So
yeah, exactly. There's enough role for him there that I think that decision was probably made easy, at least by the people going to IR. He was Poles' first offensive draft pick. Poles has never cut anyone that he's drafted from the 4th round or higher. So there was probably a little bit of that. But now, like we said, it probably got made easier by having 2 receivers and a running back head to IR. But being that he offers like a full-on starter at the kick return position, even though I don't even know what to think with kick return position at the moment, it probably would have been interesting, even with everyone healthy, to see them. I think there's a chance that Velus Jones could have snuck on. Now, Adam Schefter yesterday, I don't know if you watched his talk with Chicago, with ESPN Chicago, but he was saying that he thought that Velus Jones is someone that could have legitimately netted them some sort of return in trade value. Now, he said a 6th or a 7th. But someone that's looking to round out their basically what we just said, someone looking to round out their roster at those 2 offensive spots and looking for someone they can rely on in the kick return game. He was thinking that maybe it could have been something they could have got something for.
I wonder if that also has to do with the kick return rules too, with teams trying to get creative there because with the new kickoff, there's just going to be more kickoff return opportunities. So I think that does help his value a little bit and probably helped him make this roster too. If the kick return rules weren't changed and he was just a wide receiver pretty much only, and he's not returning punts, then I don't know if he makes the team. But I think That's interesting that I did not see that about Schefter saying that they could.
Well, I mean, grain of salt. By all accounts, Poles is very friendly with the media and plays the game fairly well. If he was trying to get anything out of Vilas before cutting him, that might be the best way to go about it.
Sure.
In case other teams were like monitoring that cut situation.
Yeah, and maybe if that was Poles trying to get that out there, maybe don't rule that out yet. Maybe there's
exactly.
If you have a team who was maybe interested in, then like, well, we can maybe get a kick returner off waivers, but then they don't get their guy on waivers or anything like that. Maybe they go back and offer a 7th-round pick, and maybe that's the move that the Bears do to clear up that one roster spot that they still need to do. So don't rule it out, but it's probably a long shot at this point, but not completely over.
I mean, I'm my hope is that somehow Dan Hardy makes it to week 1. He would be the guy that I'm pulling to not be the lamb to the slaughter for Khari Blasingame. But it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
Like, there might, at this point of the offseason, you've done the cut down. There may be 1 or 2 moves left for the Bears. You could argue that like this is, you can really start getting an idea of what the Bears, the 2024 Chicago Bears are going to look like. But there might be a little bit of a difference between now and opening day. Was there any cuts or keeps that surprised you really, other than Jatari Carr, I suppose?
Well, Doug Kramer did not necessarily surprised me because what surprised me was that he actually played pretty well this preseason, he was light years better this preseason than he was last preseason. He was really bad last preseason. So, but the fact that they kept a center only guy on the roster makes me think that maybe Ryan Bates might go to IR at some point or something like that, because
I literally just saw a tweet that said he will not be headed to IR. One thing that jumps, I think.
So that's interesting because then you have a guy you're basically your 10th offensive lineman who can only play center, and then you have Coleman Shelton who's starting. You have Ryan Bates who would be your backup center, and then you have Doug Kramer who's your 3rd backup center, which seems weird to me. It's just from a roster building standpoint. Not saying anything about Doug Kramer's ability to play football. Just from a roster building standpoint, it seems weird to keep a 3rd center on the roster. Yeah. But maybe they just, I was talking with someone on Twitter, it might just be a situation where they thought if they cut him now, he would be claimed on waivers. But if you cut him after the cut downs, you might be able to maybe sneak him through to the practice squad a little bit easier. So that might be the situation that's going on there. But that one was, to me, interesting. But besides that, I don't know about interesting, but Travis Homer making the roster.
And I thought that was a little interesting for sure.
That again probably has more to do with Ian Wheeler going on IR. But yeah, I mean he hasn't really shown much as a runner. That's a special teams position mostly.
Yeah.
But he hasn't really done a whole lot for me. But that's really, I'm just trying to look at kind of going down the list, and I'm not seeing a whole lot of really things I could get too excited about, and not a whole lot of things I can get too angry about. Which I guess is a good thing.
What's his name? Reddy
Stewart.
Reddy Stewart. What are you going to do, right? I mean, it almost goes to show, and we actually said it live in time as it was happening when we were watching the game, that like sometimes like the uphill battle of making an NFL roster is so much more uphill than people realize. You can go out and basically have what you would see as like a perfect game for a corner, like, a pick six and another pick, and being hard-nosed tackler the whole game. But when it comes time to make a roster, it's like, sorry, man.
Yeah. We said when we were doing the last show, when we were kind of predicting this, the cornerback was like the hardest position because it was probably the deepest position we had. I think we have eight quality, not maybe starting caliber, but 8 NFL caliber cornerbacks on our roster, and we only kept 6 of them. So Reddy Stewart and Greg Stroman are both cut. But Josh Blackwell and Jalen Jones have always played well.
Totally.
And having our good special teams players too, like
playing in the NFL.
Yeah.
It's tough.
It's tough. If Reddy Stewart, if this was on the roster, was in preseason 2 years ago, I think there's not, without a doubt, he makes the roster. It's just a different team.
Totally.
Now, so hopefully you can get him back in the practice squad because he did show enough to definitely a guy you want around and in the building in case there are injuries. So hopefully he comes back to the practice squad. Another thing to kind of keep in mind, because I always see people kind of predicting the practice squad, is usually the practice squad only has a couple people from like your actual training camp. You supplement your practice squad with a lot of people from other rosters too. So, but there will be some people. So I think if we're talking about practice squad, like Ray Stewart seems to be a practice squad guy for sure. They'll want to bring back. I mentioned before Michael Baskerville. He's been on the practice squad last year. I think he plays well in the preseason. Probably a guy you want to bring back. Trying to think of anyone else. Well, Colin Johnson, the wide receiver, kind of had a good preseason. Maybe him bring back. But probably bring back either Brett Rippon. If he gets signed elsewhere, you got Austin Reed on the practice squad. So just off the top of my head, those are some guys that to kind of keep an eye on. Any other positions?
Did anything else around the league pique your interest?
There were a couple of guys who got cut that I liked, in the draft, either this year or like last year or a couple of years ago, but no one that I thought a veteran guy who got cut that was kind of interesting was Calvin Throckmorton from the Broncos got released. He's a veteran, so he's been, he's like a 5-year pro or something, but he's been a backup his entire career, but has always played kind of well when getting into the game. So if they wanted to get a more veteran presence as a backup interior offensive lineman, that could be a route they go. I was thinking that more when I thought Ryan Bates might go to IR, but if Ryan Bates is avoiding IR, maybe that's not something that they really need to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, keep an eye out for. It's funny because before we were doing our thing, I was thinking, keep an eye out for DNs and D tackles, but they've already made their move to both the DN and D tackle. That doesn't mean they're not going to still try to upgrade those positions, but I still think it would be kind of weird if they traded for these guys and then claimed someone else to jump them. So that seems weird. So maybe if not those positions, I don't really know what other position you're going to be looking for. Maybe a wide receiver. I mean, because Velus Jones and DeAndre Carter are special teams guys, so you really only have 4 wide receivers, actual wide receivers on your roster. But I don't know. It'd be tough.
Yeah. I bet you. If they had been able to keep Dante Pettis, he would have been a guy that really slotted in as that true 5th wide receiver.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting. Those trades don't stop them from making like they've said before. They'll always look to improve the roster. It probably doesn't stop them from making like a big needle moving move if somehow that move showed itself. But it probably does stop them from doing like an incrementally better move. So when you trade for a guy like that. Whether it's Taylor or what's the other one? What's the other guy's name? Williams, right? Yeah. Like it probably does make it a little less likely that you do anything around I'm killing it with names right now. Who was the vet we signed last year?
Yannick Ngakoue.
Yeah, it makes it a Yannick Ngakoue type move a little bit less likely. It kind of seems like they've made your decision that if they can't really make an aggressive upgrade at that position, they're going to try with some younger, cheaper talent that are more upside guys, maybe lower floors.
Yeah, Ngakoue, you're right. Ngakoue doesn't make sense at this point. If they can find a way to spin something for a big name, that's still on the table. But yeah, those guys probably off. Not really in the cards at this point. I guess the other guy I just remembered that could be maybe potentially upgrade is the Vikings cut Lewis Cine, their first round pick from a few years ago, who had a pretty devastating injury as a rookie. But I mean, I think he'd be someone you might want to claim. He'd be probably an upgrade over Elijah Hicks. I don't think Elijah Hicks has shown much.
Is Lewis Cine straight safety? I thought he played a corner. To be honest with you,
pretty sure he was a safety. I'm pretty confident he's a safety.
Yeah, so he's a safety. Yeah, I mean that would be an interesting move for sure. You have to wonder kind of how that how it came to be, especially considering some of the issues that they've had in their defensive secondary the last couple of years. But
always beware. I mean, I'm not going to say I've seen really any snaps of Lewis Cine's career. I just remember liking him out of college a few years ago, and I know he was a first-round pick, so it's someone you just might want to kick the tires on, but don't have a lot of high hopes of him to ever turn anything. But I think that's just a position. I've never been a big fan of Elijah Hicks. I feel like he's gotten opportunities and really hasn't done much with it. I don't think he's terrible as a backup safety, but I think it's a position you could potentially get some reinforcements in. So maybe that's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah. The Packers cut Kalen King, like the Penn State corner. That's surprising to me, man. I thought
what a downfall from Kalen King.
Holy man! 2 years ago, I would have said I would have taken him in the first 2 rounds. I would have thought, and then 7th round now, and doesn't even make it this season.
That's crazy.
It is a little bit crazy.
Marvin Harrison really killed him. He had one game against Marvin Harrison and never recovered.
That's funny. Siaki Ika cut. Yeah, I was looking at some of the comments there. It looks like the Browns fans are getting pretty sick and tired of him.
Yeah, Browns fans were saying how he was awful. I didn't like his tape coming out of college that much either. He had a decent like either junior or sophomore year, and then his last year in college was like not impressive at all. And then that's why he kind of went in the third round, and then apparently didn't do much in his time in Cleveland.
A.J. Dillon placed on IR. Oh, the 49ers placed Elijah Mitchell on IR.
Yep.
Damn, I was hoping to get some squeeze out of him in fantasy. I'm in a 14-team league, and getting a good running back in a 14-team league is just absurd, man.
That is tough.
You can't be having Elijah Mitchell go to IR, especially considering someone drafted that other guy there like 4 rounds later.
Yeah.
What's his name? He's a rookie running back this year. It's the running back or the backup running back for San Francisco.
Backup running back for San Francisco. He's a rookie this year.
I think he was a rookie last year, but
sure.
I'd imagine you'd know his song. Yeah, Jordan Mason.
Jordan Mason. Okay, yeah.
Good things about him.
I'm just scrolling Twitter right now to see if I can see any cuts that come in late here.
Yeah, no.
Bills cut Lyle Collins.
Really?
Safety. Yeah. Safety Kareem Jackson too. That's maybe a bet you can bring in at safety. Might need that. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like there was. I think it's just as I do this more and more, and as I get older, I just get less and less excited about cut down day.
I think in the past too, like I said, it meant more for us when we were bad and we were looking around the league for help. For those like sneaky ones, like someone like Lewisine, when we were bad, we would have been like all over.
Yeah.
But the Bears roster is competitive, and like it's kind of been evident that that's the case as the offseason has built up, and you've heard reports out of camp, and you've heard some of these veterans having opinions on the guys that they're playing against, and I think the competition level's there. And knowing that, it wasn't really about finding out what the roster was going to look like after today, except for those few that we highlighted. It was more about, like getting through it and having, like, I think week one's the focus. But that's like when we were bad, this was exciting, but we're good. It's like if you're stressing about the players that are getting cut today, you might need to consider tanking.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just a completely different mindset. Like right now, I'm just like, let's just get to week one as fast as possible. I just want to watch Caleb Williams throw football. I don't care about our fifth cornerback.
I'm gonna be a mess that whole weekend, man.
Yeah.
Like it's been a while since I was this excited for a season.
For sure.
For sure. I think we should be the Texans, but I also think the Texans are an underrated group. I think that they got more talent than people realize there.
The Titans?
Sorry, the Titans.
We have the Texans week 2, right?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
That'll be a good test. It'll be really nice to get a good game versus a good win versus the Titans would make that game in week 2 a lot more exciting.
Right.
I mean, it'll be exciting either way. It's one of the for some reason we got kind of gypped with primetime games, it feels, this year, considering how fun I think almost universally people would admit the Bears team seems on paper. There's some pretty boring teams with more primetime games than us.
Yeah, I wonder if that'll change because they have those late season games that can be flexed.
That's right.
I'm hoping if the Bears go on a run early in the year, then we will have probably 2 games flexed in the prime time at the end of the year. So, because they are going to be. I don't know if they're going to be good or quote unquote. I think they're or great, but they're going to be fun to watch for sure. They're going to be a fun team. So, like, you got a young quarterback, you got a young wide receiver, you just got a young, talented team. So they're going to be fun.
Should be a team that slightly think any game of the year go, why we could win this. If you get some good production out of the guys that are the like, there's a handful of guys on the roster that if they're good and play above what their probably expected range is, the Bears could be really, really good this year. Like if Jaquan Brisker takes a step forward, or if Tyreek Stevenson takes that next step, which I think he could, if Austin Booker contributes more than we expected, If Caleb Williams comes out of the gate hotter than rookie quarterbacks do, if all those things happen, the Bears have a really, really, really good roster. And it's on a game-by-game basis. You're like, man, maybe on paper we're not as good as this team, but maybe this is the Austin Booker game. If you get 2 sacks out of him, like you going up against the Texans on a Sunday Night Football type game is a lot more winnable than you realize.
Yep. I think there's high variance in pretty much all the guys you just mentioned, because if Jaquan Brisker takes the next step, then they're in good shape, but he also could continue to be
totally.
And maybe Tyreek Stevenson, just to play devil's advocate, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but maybe Tyreek Stevenson has maybe a little bit of a sophomore slump.
Totally.
And then your corners are not good. Maybe Caleb Williams is good, but has normal rookie ups and downs. But there's still going to be just a fun team.
Yep.
Okay. So
another guy,
I think there's a lot of variance there. I think double digits wins is in the for sure in the
in the current
not expected outcomes, but possible outcomes. And playoffs are a possible outcome.
Totally.
So.
And we said the same thing. It kind of had the same feeling in 2018 because we lost that first game in 2018, and then the Bears got hot and started rolling. And it was just make the playoffs. Once you make the playoffs, anything can happen. Like you can be those funny Giants teams or that funny Eagles team that just makes it, that gets hot. So even the idea that the Bears, are going to be in contention for that spot. Like we believed it last year, but we didn't fucking believe it last year. Bears should be in contention for a playoff spot all year. Like we said, there shouldn't be any games where they go in thinking these guys are going to beat the brakes off us. And if you can win a couple more, then your fair share of those games that are 50-50 toss-ups. There's no reason this team couldn't be playing, good football into January.
Mm-hmm. And I think this year is different too because he mentioned in 20 the Mitch Trubisky year we lost the Packers. We lost in week 1 and it was kind of doom and gloom after that. If the Bears go out and lose to the Titans week 1, I don't think there's any reason to panic. It's just okay, it's fine. We'll be okay. So I think that's the difference to me is I'm going to have high hopes for this season. I'm going to be really excited. But if they start off a little bit slow, I'm not going to jump off the bandwagon after a year after one game I 100% did a few years ago. So
2019.
2018,
we were really, really good, and I really believed in us. And I remember there was a lot of hype around the Bears, especially for people that were close that thought this Bears team can do it. And I had people that were usually pretty, pessimistic were saying we could have done things like go to the Super Bowl. And that was the year we went out and scored 3 points against the Packers in Chicago week 1. I was in the building.
Mm-hmm.
And that rest of the season, I was like, you know what? These guys just don't have it. The head coach didn't get them ready, all this stuff, whatever it is. And those are some concerns that I actually have with Eberflus as well. I'm excited to see how the team comes out in games that matter. Because we haven't really had a whole lot of those in his tenure. But I will say, I was watching some highlights of the Bears down the stretch last year. Into the later tenure of him really figuring out himself as a head coach. Kind of, coinciding with the Montez Sweat trading and him leveling up his swag a little bit, also taking over defensive play calling abilities. But man, those fucking Bears were playing hard football and the Lovie Smith stuff where everyone was rallying to the ball and people had energy on offense and in defense. If that can carry over to this season, if the juju of the team in the locker room and the positive leadership of Matt Eberflus can become a plus, as opposed to just being something that we maybe feel like we have to overcome. There were some serious talks in the building of moving on from Flus after the season. Despite that, that wasn't just noise from the outside. When Schefter tweeted about Eberflus staying, he was there were some long nights and conversations about what to do here. So other people
Ryan Poles had to fight for him. There was definitely talks about getting rid of him.
Yeah, 100%. But I would say that, if you wanted to make the case for him, you show that tape from the Bears playing, the football they were playing down the stretch in December and November last year. And if that's the Bears team that shows up in September this year, with that kind of energy and belief in themselves, as well as the new talent that we've added, man.
And it has definitely carried over from last season into the preseason already. The preseason was like that too. Guys flying to the ball, guys really putting it all out there. So it's already kind of carried over a little bit. Obviously, the regular season is a whole new ball game, but it's nice to see it carry over to the preseason. Hopefully, it carries over from the preseason to the regular season too. But yeah, that is. I mean, there were a lot of, like you said, the talks about replacing Matty Eberflus. I think Matty Eberflus showed a lot this year, like you said. After the Montez Sweat trade, he's a defensive coach, and he turned around that defense. The Montez Sweat trade helped, but that was also him taking over play calling duties and just him being on the team. So he clearly knows how to get guys fired up, and that's mostly what a head coach is meant to be. He's not, the X's and O's, he is calling the defensive plays, but the X's and O's aren't as important as getting your guys ready to play, getting your guys excited, having your guys want to play for you, which he definitely can do. So I don't have many reservations about Matty Eberflus anymore, as I once did as a head coach. I think he can be a head coach of a playoff football team and an eventual Super Bowl champion football team. But we'll see.
Yeah,
I think. Really a lot comes down to Shane Waldron this year.
It does.
We need to know. I know Shane Waldron. He was in Seattle and did good things. I don't know. Obviously, Pete Carroll's there too. So I don't know if Pete Carroll was helping him or holding him back. So we'll know for sure what Shane Waldron looks like after this year. That's the question mark on the coaching staff in my mind. I'm not saying that in a negative way. It's just I want him to come out early on and just and remove any doubt from anyone's mind that he's the right offensive coordinator.
Yeah, there was actually a lot of talk about that dynamic, about how much of the Seattle Seahawks offense was Waldron and how much influence kind of snuck in from
Carroll.
Yeah, from Pete Carroll. Now, the thought at the time was that what he was doing was influencing it towards more running. That was the talk in the street, is that Waldron probably wanted to do a little bit more passing, but the way that Pete Carroll, more wanted to shape his games and game plans, lended itself to having a little bit more pace and running the ball in those situations. Hard to argue with Carroll with the success that he had, but it does seem that Waldron does have a little bit more of an enthusiasm for throwing the ball than he's shown in the past, at least. Yeah. Now, that being said, I think the stuff that Carroll was trying to get out of the run game, slowing things down, giving your defense a break, making it a little bit easier on your quarterback, are things that are probably good right now for the Bears and Caleb Williams.
Mm-hmm.
There probably will be, to some extent, training wheels type game planning for the first couple of weeks before, or even you could argue the first year until you say, hey, if we need someone to steer the ship, can we trust this guy to do it? Now, that'll probably happen sooner than later. We're not talking about drafting Justin Fields at the 11th pick. We're talking about someone that most of the NFL would agree it seemed like the generational talent, if you want to use that term. So hopefully it happens sooner than later, but I wouldn't expect the Bears to come out too pass happy the first little bit.
I agree. Because I think Eberflus is, I don't know how much say he has in the offensive game plan, but I think if he had his way, he would be kind of serving that Pete Carroll role, saying we need to run the ball, we need to control the clock. He just seems like that kind of guy. So and I'm not mad about that, because I do think that's a good way to handle a rookie quarterback. I don't want you to be run heavy. I don't want you to be running the ball in situations when you shouldn't be running the ball. But I think having a balanced attack, and I don't want to see them run the ball on first down, run the ball on second down, throw on third down, and then punt. That's the worst. Yeah. But I want them to mix in the running game and be creative with the running game and keep defenses on their toes and, throw the ball on first down a lot, but then, run the ball in certain situations too. And I think that's hopefully what Shane Waldron can do to help Caleb Williams, because the more you can keep the defense off balance, the easier Caleb Williams' job is going to be. If they're keen in on pass on third and long, no rookie quarterback is going to be able to succeed in that situation.
Yeah.
So the nice balance attack is the way to go. In my younger days, I'd be like, just go fucking 11 personnel, four verts every play, and just let Caleb do his
thing. That's the modern NFL.
That's the modern NFL, but the more you watch football, the more you realize there's still a place for the run game in football.
Yeah, and the more you kind of look into it, the more it really does lend itself to the things that the Bears are good at right now. They have a great running back committee at the moment. They have at least two people that are definitely talented NFL running backs that can create more than is given to them more often than not. On top of that, it gets talked about less, but Caleb Williams is without a doubt a +1 runner. If you wanted to do stuff off of keepers and things like that, he can beat you with your legs if you don't count for him in the run game, which makes everything easier. It was true of Justin Fields too, but it's just nice to remember that we're not exactly losing that with Caleb. On top of that, it sets up the play action game so nicely, which lends itself to everything that Caleb does so well. Getting him into space, like keeping the game in front of him, getting him on the move too. Stuff that lends itself to Caleb, and also stuff that just lends itself to probably finding some success as a quarterback on the whole as a rookie. Get yourself farther from the line of scrimmage, keep everything in front of you. So those are things I think we expect to see. But I will say, even in the preseason, when the Bears would go incomplete pass or run, and it's 3rd and 7, without a doubt, it's a totally different feeling with Caleb back there than it was with Justin Fields.
Yeah.
Early with Justin Fields, it became something where it was like, please don't make this mistake here, dude. Like, please, like, make this work. But watching Caleb, man, it feels like we're in attack mode.
Yeah.
It's like, you better hope you defend this well. And then if he takes off in the pocket, you still got to defend for another 6 or 7 seconds. And then, like we saw in the Bills game, and if you're trying to do all of that, he might just prance his way up 12 yards forward for the first down.
Yeah. I remember, last year there was all those times where it would be like 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, and the Bears would run the ball. And we would be like, why the hell are you doing that? Like, give us a chance. And I think it was, in hindsight, they just didn't trust him to pick up, in an obvious pass situation, to actually pick up a first down.
Yeah.
So run the ball, you might get it, or if not, you punt and save field position. You don't want to throw a pick, or you don't want to take a sack on 3rd and 7, and then you put yourself in a bad situation. So,
it's a great point.
With Caleb Williams, I don't envision many 3rd and 8 draws.
No,
hopefully not. Hopefully you can drop back and maybe make something work. So
you don't leave the Lamborghini in the garage, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But the thing with that too is that, and maybe this is the crazy conspiracy theorist in me, but I will say that even the last 2 years, even last year with Justin Fields and thinking that we were putting him in this position to really succeed, early when we started losing and it was obvious he probably wasn't the guy, I don't know if there still wasn't times where there was almost a partial tank going on.
Mm-hmm.
Or just maybe all it was an exchange between Poles and Eberflus to say, hey, we probably are already playing for next year. We don't need to win all these games. And then when there was decision making about play calling or personnel and things like that, and maybe you could defer to getting younger people more looks, or being a little bit more conservative when maybe the stats now say you shouldn't be. They could defer to doing the stuff that maybe took their win percentage down versus bringing it up, because I don't think that there was part of me that really thought there was still this subtle tank going on, and maybe it was because Getsy's play calling was as timid as it was in big moments. But I would be surprised if we saw anything similar to that this year.
Yeah, I do wonder how much that had to play into it. Like you said, I don't know if it was an actual tank, because I don't think that really happens. But subtle tank, I like how you put that. They did things that didn't help their win probability, so that they could evaluate guys for next year and stuff like that.
Totally. Leveraging the future versus the current. And there were probably times in the year when, if things had gone a different way one way or another, Bears could have been sniffing a playoff spot. I think we ended up winning 7 or 8 games. But as it stood, maybe you sniff that playoff spot and you end up with Brock Bowers instead of Romo Dunes.
Right. Yeah. Or maybe even someone even worse than that. So
God forbid. Yeah. God forbid I don't even want to think about it. But it's exciting. It was funny, man. I was even thinking today, it feels crazy that even just last year, our quarterback and our offensive coordinator was Fields and Getsy.
Yeah. I've already seen Raiders fans cursing out Luke Getsy, and I'm like, yep.
Really? So funny.
I guess out of reasons, yep, I remember that.
Yeah. Well, better days ahead, boys. Better days ahead.
That's right. No more Luke Getsy talk.
No, I think so. I think that's it for the most part. There wasn't anything entirely surprising with what came through.
Exactly. I think if something happens now, then that will be kind of the surprise move. The surprise moves were Darrell Taylor and Chris Williams. Didn't really expect that. So that's kind of where you're at.
And cut day probably wasn't going to be the big day for the Bears to make any other big moves again. Now, like I said, there might be one or two moves left. It's probably going to come between now and the first day, and probably have to do with something like, getting a Kari Blasingame onto the roster, or if for whatever reason
a fairly high echelon player becomes available. But I don't think today was ever going to be a really big shocker. At least nothing like a current draft picks this year being cut, or like people with money still on their contract being cut. It was always probably going to be a little bit of a quiet day for the Bears.
Yeah, I agree. Not a whole, like I said, we'll see if anything happens from here. But it's looking like this is going to be pretty close to the week 1 opening day roster. So, anything else you want to add, or should we just wrap it up here?
I think that's good. I think that's there'll be more insight that comes in on Twitter. Some people are probably doing deep dives and cut ups of all the people that make the team and things like that. But this is kind of roughly what we thought this was going to be when we went over it. Save for probably a few little heres and theres on the offensive line, the back end of the offensive line of the defensive back group. But the core of the Bears is pretty obvious. You're going to be leaning on your Montez Sweats and your Jalen Johnsons, and at the end of the day, despite all the talent that the Bears think Caleb Williams have, there's enough pieces around him in your Herbert and Swift and Rome and DJ and Keenan that as long as you get average to good quarterback play out of them, that'll be the formula for the Bears all year. Great defense and leaning on your studs on offense.
Yep. I think you kind of mentioned it, just kind of jogged my memory. If there is another way to kind of clear space is if a team offers you something for Khalil Herbert, you might be able to recoup one of those 6-round picks you traded. I'm not saying I would do that. I like Khalil Herbert. I think they should keep him, but there have been reports that maybe they don't like him as much. So if you can get a pick for him, and then you still got 3 running backs, and you have 3 running backs and Velus Jones as essentially a 4th running back. So might be maybe a luxury you can recoup on those picks on. So maybe that's how you open up a roster spot. A lot of opportunities. So we'll see. But we'll keep everyone up to date on Twitter if any other moves happen. So make sure to follow us at CFC Bears and at Luke O'Grady, and we'll be tweeting out our thoughts over the next couple of days. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Make sure to like, subscribe, all that stuff, and we'll talk to you next week. Bear down, everyone.
Bear down.